If there's anything that I'm a sucker for in a show, it's an emotionally gripping tale. If my content doesn't make that apparent, then I don't know what else will. The only thing that I enjoy more than an emotionally gripping tale is an emotionally gripping tale that spans the course of a few episodes or even an entire series. For me personally, I love when a bigger story is told over the course of many episodes because it gives us that glorious moment where we get to cross some T's and dot some I's when things finally come full circle in the end. I just adore that feeling. There's something so special to me about having theories and questions about a show from the start and having them answered throughout the series or even all the way in the end. Of course, it has to be done in the right way to make it not feel like you're just putting out a halfway finished story, but when it's done right, oh man, is it just, chef's kiss. There are many cartoons that did a great job of accomplishing this, but one in particular that I want to focus on today is Danny Phantom. Now, one of the biggest selling points of pulling someone into an overarching story is starting it off strong. The beginning of the story has to be juicy and interesting enough to make the viewer want to invest in something longer than the 30-minute show that they originally signed up for. This is something that I feel like Danny Phantom was able to pull off really well. The show's writers did a phenomenal job of pulling you into a story that you may not have even realized was going to be overarching. That's the beauty of this kind of show. Of course, it's one thing to pull someone into an overarching story and end with a cliffhanger. The viewer is well aware of what's going on, they know that they're going to be waiting for the rest of the story, and it can be pretty simple straightforward. In my opinion though, the pinnacle of pulling this off perfectly is when you can do it without that cliffhanger ending. There's something so magical to me about an episode being so good that it's burned into your memory. It leaves you questioning details, yet wraps things up in an acceptable way. Then fast forward to the future when they pick that plot point back up, you remember exactly what the last episode in that overarching plot covered because they did such a great job of drawing you in and leaving you wanting more. A forced overarching plot sticks out like a sore pink thumb in my opinion. It's like a two-part episode that has a cliffhanger between the two episodes. The first episode builds up to this dramatic climax, then cliffhanger. From there, more often than not, when the second part continues where the cliffhanger left off, it's usually very anticlimactic in comparison to how hyped up it was in the cliffhanger. However, when your overarching story feels natural and casually sprinkled throughout the series, it just hits different. And that's why today, on our nostalgic walk down memory lane, we're going to check out an episode of Danny Phantom that really emphasizes the point that I'm trying to make here. We're talking about the Season 1 episode, Bitter Reunions. At the very start of this episode, we see Danny riding his scooter home at night. He's super thankful that on his way home, there weren't any ghost detours this time that resulted in him missing his strict 10 o'clock curfew. Naturally, the second he expresses joy about that fact, that familiar ghostly breath starts to exude itself from his mouth as his ghost senses begin to tingle. He spies a trio of ghost vultures who are quickly flying in and out of house after house after house. Danny goes ghost and flies up to confront them.
Mind your own business, fancy pants ghost boy!
Yeah, we've been cycling this town for hours. We could have been halfway to Florida by now. Ask for directions.
I know where I'm going!
After arguing a little further, the three of them fly out to the bus and up into the sky where Danny asks them yet again what they're doing. One of the vultures explains that they're on a search and destroy mission, and they're wondering if he's willing to help them find someone specific.
Can you help us find and peck to death this guy here?
Dead?
See, I told you he'd know where he is.
Immediately knowing that something is off, Danny decides to jump into action and attack the ghost vultures. The three of them duke it out, but Danny ends up making quick work of them, causing them to fly away with their tail feathers between their legs. As they do so, they accidentally drop the clipping of Danny's dad, leaving him questioning why these birds would want to do away with his father. Speak of the devil though, just then the clock strikes 10 p.m. and Danny realizes that it's time to go home and face the wrath of his parents for being late.
This is becoming a problem. You're constantly late coming home.
You're shirking from your chores.
Your grades are slipping.
You're shirking from your chores.
You already said chores.
I know, but when you don't do them, I get stuck with them.
Danny makes an honest attempt to level with his parents, explaining to them that he's under a lot of pressure and that they have no idea what it's like to be a kid in this day and age.
That's the oldest excuse in the book. There's nothing you're going through that your father and I didn't go through when we were your age.
Yeah? Well, I beg to differ.
Just then, Danny's sister Jazz chimes in, claiming that the reason Danny feels like they can't relate to him is because they've never taken the time to tell him about their childhood and how they met. This gives Jack the idea that the answer to this problem is forcing their kids to come with them to their 20th college reunion at the University of Wisconsin.
Wisconsin?
Sure, my old pal Vlad is throwing a huge shindig there. We'll take the RV so the whole family can go together. You can learn more about your mothers and my college days, and while we drive, I can blather on about ghosts. Haha, it works!
Next thing you know, we see the RV that Jack named the Fenton Family Ghost Assault Vehicle cruising down the freeway. As Jazz complains to Danny, saying that he messed up and now she's getting punished too, Danny decides that he's going to get some fresh air, so he goes to roll down the window.
Don't press any buttons. I'll get you for this.
Later that night, we see the family sleeping in the RV at a rest stop. Jack's telling everyone to get some rest so that they can be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed when they meet his friend Vlad tomorrow. During this conversation, Jazz connects the dots that her dad is talking about Vlad Masters, who's a celebrity that was named Affluent Magazine's Billionaire of the Year. Jack continues to tell the story of how Vlad was his best friend in college.
We did everything together, until the thick fingers of fate stuck themselves right in Vlad's eyes.
I'm telling you, Jack, it won't work.
Bogus, V-Man, it totally will. This proto-portal is guaranteed to bust open the wall into the ghost dimension.
Jack, these calculations aren't right.
Banzai!
Jack throws the switches, despite Maddie pointing out that the calculations aren't correct and trying to stop him. As a result, the portal opens up, and the power of it surges wildly, blasting Vlad right in the face.
He was hospitalized with a horrible case of ectoacne. It devastated him and killed his social life.
Jack explains that the day that happened was the very last time that Vlad ever spoke to him. However, Jack is hopeful that after all these years, Vlad's finally forgiven him. We cut right on over to the next day, where the family is arriving to Vlad's massive mansion. They walk on up to the massive structure, and they're greeted by Vlad, who's been waiting for them.
Jack and Maddie, you've never looked lovelier, my dear. Please come in.
Vladdy, my man, it's good to... Hello? Hello?
As they walk through the foyer, Jazz notices all the green and gold everywhere, which she assumes is just god-awful design choice. However, Danny is able to connect the dots and explain to his sister that Vlad is just a huge fan of the Green Bay Packers. Jazz then questions further, wondering if he's a billionaire, why doesn't he just buy the team themselves instead of all this random memorabilia?
Because the Packers are owned by the city of Green Bay and they won't sell them to me. One of two things my wealth has not as of yet been able to acquire.
Is he hitting on Mom?
As long as he's got working toilets and Mom says no, who cares?
Maddie immediately gets very uncomfortable and says that she's gonna go let Jack in. Meanwhile, Danny finds himself pretty impressed by Vlad's collection of Packers memorabilia, including his prized possession, a football signed by Ray Nitschke himself. Just then, Jack comes up out of nowhere and tackles the absolute heck out of Vlad, just completely unprompted.
I see you still got the old moves.
Give me that! I never had any old moves. All those years in the hospital robbed me of that. Yes.
Vlad explains that all of his time in the hospital after the accident, as much as it hurt him emotionally, gave him ample time to chart out his life and make some decisions to help make him very wealthy.
And it never would have happened without you, Jack.
Yeah, maybe we should go.
No, you should stay with me. That's the whole reason I'm throwing the reunion here in my castle. Previously home to the legendary Wisconsin Dairy King. Just so I could reconnect with you, Jack.
Vlad insists that Jack and his family stay here with him. However, Jack finds himself debating that decision, citing the fact that they have what he thinks is a really cool RV to stay in. But when Vlad tells him that the Dairy King's ghost could very well be haunting the castle still, Jack is immediately sold.
I'll get the bags!
We then cut on over to later that night, where Jack and Maddie are asleep in bed. Jack gets up to go to the bathroom, and he finds himself wandering the halls while half asleep. As he continues walking, out of nowhere we see the 3 ghost vultures from the beginning reappear. As that's happening, Danny wakes up out of a dead sleep with his ghost senses tingling, that same familiar ghostly haze flowing from his mouth.
Hey, what gives?
Sweet relief.
With Jack safely in the bathroom now, Danny phases through the ceiling to confront the vultures. However, as soon as he gets their attention, they end up scurrying away in fear the second that they look towards his direction.
That was almost too easy.
Ah, bright boy.
Oh, whatever. I was aiming for the birds, but you'll do.
Danny throws a punch at this mysterious ghost man, but he easily catches Danny's fist, throwing him across the hall and into the stone wall. Caught off guard by the speed and strength of the ghost, Danny plans a more calculated attack. However, he's stopped dead in his tracks when he's caught by his throat and thrown straight to the ground.
Danny Phantom, right?
You know me?
Of course I know you. You're the ghost boy who uses his powers for good. Oh, quaint. Aren't you going to try to shove me into your ridiculous thermos?
I don't want to fight you.
No, you don't.
Danny is thrown back across a table nearby, and he gets right back up to fight. He blasts as fiercely as he can, but unfortunately this super powerful, mysterious ghost is able to block literally everything that Danny throws at him.
So, year 1. Tell me, child, can you do this yet?
No, I can't. How are you doing all this?
Years of practice, which you, unfortunately, have no time for.
These numerous blasts leave Danny weak and vulnerable to attack. It's at this point that a massive bombshell is dropped. The ghost hits Danny with a huge blow that sends him flying out of the room and into the hallway. As he lay there weak on the ground, he falls unconscious right before the ghost he was fighting comes in to finish the job. At that moment though, this happens.
The ghost boy is Jack's son? Well, what do you know?
Danny wakes up panicking as his last memories of the fight he was just in. However, he's confused to find himself waking up back in his bed. He looks around, asking himself where he is and what happened, but just then, Vlad walks in saying that he was about to ask him the same thing. Not connecting the dots that Vlad was the ghost that he was just fighting, Danny makes an excuse, saying that he thinks he was probably worn out from the car ride, and he apologizes for the scare, assuming that Vlad found him in the hall and brought him back to his room. Danny goes back to bed, and Vlad walks out with an evil laugh, making an emphasis on telling Danny to sleep tight. The next day, we see Danny wandering the house during the reunion. He finds his sister Jazz in Vlad's theater.
Jazz, aren't you coming to the reunion?
What? And watch a bunch of old fossils pogo to new wave music? Pass.
Across the house, we see Danny walk into the main gathering area with his parents. Danny looks none too thrilled to be there, but his parents are ecstatic. His dad catches eye of one of his old friends, and he calls to her, but she looks none too thrilled.
Jack, Maddie, how nice.
Danny, meet Harriet Chin. She's a big shot reporter for the Milwaukee Journal now, but back in my college days, she was just Harry. Harry Chin. Ha! Get it?
I'm really sorry, Harriet.
Sweetie, you married him. You should be.
The 80s new wave music starts to play, and Jack is super hyped to go pogo with Maddie. We fast forward a little later, where everyone is still having a blast, save for Danny, who just looks so bored.
Well, son, you're looking much better. I was wondering if you could do me a huge favor.
Oh, sure, Mr. Masters. But call me Danny. Son's what my dad calls me.
Oh, yes, of course.
Vlad asks Danny if he'd be willing to go to his lab for him, saying that there's a present for his dad in there, and he would like Danny to bring it down. Not suspecting any foul play, Danny happily hops up and heads upstairs. Meanwhile, Vlad sets his sights on Maddie.
Maddie, that lab accident cost me my youthful chance at you, but that's all about to change.
Over in Vlad's lab, Danny walks in, noticing that there isn't a present in there anywhere. What he does find, though, is a picture of Vlad with his mom, which leads to him connecting the dots that the picture of his dad that the vulture got was ripped off of this picture, and it came from Vlad. With this ghastly discovery, the familiar ghost breath takes Danny by surprise yet again. He goes ghost, and within seconds, he's picked up by some ghostly tentacles above.
Let go! Those ghosts, they were two of the first ghosts I fought.
And they're not alone, pup.
Skulker?
Danny breaks free from the ghostly net and kicks the hell out of Skulker. He's super confused because last time we saw Skulker, he was not only captured by Danny and banished to the ghost zone, but he was also robbed of his exoskeleton suit. Just to make it a little more clear for those who aren't too familiar with this show, this appearance is just a costume, and under that, Skulker is this little tiny green blob with a super high-pitched voice. As Danny asks him what he's doing here and how he got his exoskeleton back, Skulker slides a small box over towards Danny. The box glows and envelops Danny's whole body and traps him with a special technology that stops him from phasing through it with his ghost powers. With the click of a button on Skulker's behalf, it electrocutes Danny, forcing him back into his human form.
The glowing blade is new.
You like it? I've had some upgrades.
No. Enough! I didn't free you to kill the boy, Skulker. Your work is done.
Yes, well, I've got to go to the library and check out a book on a gorilla. Again!
With Skulker gone, Danny starts to question everything. He asks Vlad what his point was in bringing back Skulker and the Ectopuses to attack him. Vlad drops the bombshell on him that those ghosts, and most of the others that he's fought, were originally sent to test Jack's skill as a part of his revenge plot.
Imagine my surprise when I find you, the second ghost hybrid his foolishness created.
Second? You! I'm going ghost! Going ghost! Why can't I go ghost?
You have a battle cry, hilarious.
Vlad explains to Danny that the contraption that he's in is one designed by Skulker and funded by Vlad. As long as Danny is contained in the box, he's just as human as his father is, which makes him no longer a threat to Vlad. As Danny demands that Vlad let him out, Vlad puts things into perspective for Danny, reminding him that he's just a kid who got his powers within the last year, whereas Vlad has had those same powers for 20 years now, which gave him plenty of time to hone in and perfect his skills. He reminds Danny of his proof in the pudding. The experience he has, combined with the money and power that he's gained from using his ghostly abilities for his own personal gain. He then hits Danny with a really unexpected offer.
I could train you, teach you everything I know, and all you'd have to do is renounce your idiot father.
Dude, you are one seriously crazed up Fruit Loop. That is never going to happen.
Yes, well, once your father is out of the way, we'll see how you feel.
Vlad teleports off with an evil laugh, and we cut right to the reunion where we see Danny's dad being completely bored to death by Harriet's stories from her journalism adventures. As Jack comes clean about his boredom, we see Vlad phase up through the ground and possess Jack.
So, what do you say we liven up this shindig?
Hey,
Jack, what's the matter with you?
Why, Maddie, didn't you always know I'd turn on you? That when you chose me, you chose wrong?
Get out. Get out of me!
I don't know what's come over you, but when I write about this, I
Ghost.
swear.
Overpowering me. Maddie, run.
Jack's body levitates into the air and Harriet is dumbfounded, thinking that Jack is a ghost and that she's found a huge breaking news story. Maddie grabs her hand and the two of them run away. Meanwhile, Danny is still struggling to get out of the box. Just then, he's approached by the ghost of the Dairy King, who Danny fears is there to help Vlad.
What are you gonna do? Suffocate me with Limburger? Strangle me with Swiss? Or... Let me go. Well, thank you, but why?
Well, not all ghosts are evil, right? Some of us just want to be left alone there, don't you know?
Danny asks the Dairy King for his help fighting Vlad, but the Dairy King explains that kings don't fight, they send other people to fight for them, and just like that, the Dairy King disappears back to his part of the house. Danny hears the commotion going on downstairs, and he immediately flies into action to save his dad. Meanwhile, outside, Maddie and Harriet hop right into the RV before Danny's mom proceeds to drive it right through Vlad's massive double doors and through his house. In the main area, we see Jack under the possession of Vlad, hurting people and destroying the party.
If you live to tell the tale, remember that big fat Jack Fenton did this to you?
Guess again, cheesehead.
Nobody uses Jack Fenton as a human meat puppet.
In the other room, Danny and Vlad duke it out. Vlad stops and tries to convince Danny to join him yet again, convinced that together, the two of them could be strong, powerful rulers. However, Danny isn't having any of it. As the fight continues, Danny threatens Vlad, telling him that he knows who he is and that he's not afraid to expose him to everyone. Vlad poses the same exact threat to Danny, saying that if he exposes him, then he's also exposing himself.
Mind if I cut in?
Let go of me.
Never again, woman.
Thinking on his feet, Danny phases into the RV and proceeds to drive it right towards Vlad, almost hitting his own father in the process. He gets into position and fires a shot of ectoplasmic goo at Vlad, which seems to be the one thing that he's vulnerable to. As his mother is plummeting headfirst towards the ground, Danny thinks on his feet and flies into his dad's body and jumps over to catch her. He sets her down and tells her to make sure that Harriet's okay while he finishes this. Using his dad's body, Danny walks right up to Vlad and picks him up.
I swear I'll walk out of my dad right now and expose us both, unless you agree to a truce.
You're bluffing.
No, I'm not. My parents will accept me, no matter what. But if I expose you, well, what would my mom think of you? You'll be miserable and alone for the rest of your life unless you call a truce.
Using your opponent's weaknesses against him. I am teaching you something after all, very well.
Vlad assures Danny that in a matter of time, both him and his mother will be joining forces with him by choice, but for now, he puts on this act, making Jack look good. He curses Jack, saying that his world-renowned expertise in all things ghosts has defeated him.
Until next time, son.
World-renowned expertise. Outstanding.
Jack, I have never seen you like this. You beat that ghost all the way to Kenosha.
I did? Oh, heck, I'm just doing my job.
Harriet apologizes to Jack for all of the years that she's called him a crackpot, seeming desperate to get more info for this huge ghost story that she wants to bring to her newsroom. She claims that this story is going to make Jack's career as well as her own.
I can't believe they fired Harry.
Of course they fired her. She tried to file some crackpot story about ghosts. It's the Milwaukee Journal, not the National Enquirer.
I can't believe Harry blames me. And Vlad was so mad he didn't even say goodbye. And we were all such great chums in college. bitch.
We see Danny pep-talking his dad, saying that none of what they were when they were younger matters because it's who you grow into as an adult that defines who you are. Danny says that if his dad was able to cause that much damage in college, but still grow up to be a cool ghost butt-kicking adult, then there's still hope for himself yet.
Thanks, son. But your curfew is still 10.
Oh, man.
This episode is one that, for me at least, hits really hard. There's so much to go over here and so much to unpack. First things first, we have to acknowledge the gravity of the story at hand. There are just so many moving parts here. On surface level, this episode tells the story of a broken man. He suffered a tragic accident that changed his life, and he had to rebuild himself, but the version of himself that he's built is one that's filled with regret, envy, and most of all, scorn for the man that he blames for all of this. However, this story really goes so much deeper than that. Once upon a time, Jack and Vlad were best friends. We don't get too far of a look into how Vlad was before the accident, but I have the impression that their friendship really was a genuine one. Whereas peers like Harriet would see people like Jack as obnoxious and annoying, it seemed like Vlad was one to embrace Jack's very animated behavior. In all the flashbacks and pictures shown, Vlad didn't seem to hate Jack whatsoever. But with that being said, it's worth noting that Jack is clearly awful at reading people, so for all we know, this picture he has painted in his head could be completely false, and there's a chance that Vlad maybe tolerated him at best. It's made clear throughout this entire episode that Jack was oblivious to Vlad's hatred. Either that, or he just refused to let it affect him, or even acknowledge it in the first place. Regardless though, their friendship was soured by Jack's carelessness. Jack very blatantly goofed the calculations, and instead of doing something about it, he just threw the switches with zero regard for the fact that Vlad was literally face to face with this portal. Jack's carelessness was ultimately what would lead to Vlad's life being completely changed. This man had to be hospitalized for years as a result of what Jack did. With that being said, I'd say that Vlad's hatred of Jack is justified. It's okay to not like someone after they do something so careless that pretty much ruins your life. However, it's what you do with that hatred that really matters. The fact that Vlad didn't talk to Jack for so many years is more than justified. That's okay. He doesn't owe Jack a single thing. With that being said though, Vlad seeking out revenge was just way too far. It's clear that either that accident birthed an evil deep inside of him, or it awakened an evil that was always there. The malice that he bears towards Jack is one that's nearly palpable. More than anything, it can be said that Vlad very desperately wants Jack's life. He wants to be Danny's dad, and he wants to be Maddie's husband. That's made clear by the multiple times that he calls Danny son in this episode, and of course his advances at taking Danny under his wing to become his mentor. As a result of Vlad's accident, he was robbed of the opportunity to have a normal life. He didn't have the chance to do so many things that he wanted to do. Meanwhile, Jack got to live a normal, happy life and have a family. With Vlad harboring so much malevolence towards Jack, he equipped a mindset that resulted in him feeling like this is his life and Jack's the one living it. In Vlad's mind, he should be the one who got to have all of Jack's experiences. Meanwhile, Jack should have been the one hospitalized due to his miscalculations and blatant carelessness. More than anything though, it's worth pointing out that Vlad feels like Jack robbed him of his opportunity to shoot his shot with Maddie. This right here adds so much more to the layer of spite that Vlad has for Jack, and furthermore, it adds a deeper layer of toxicity to Vlad's actions and words. As it pertains to Maddie, Vlad has a very dangerous mindset. The best way to put it into perspective is reflecting on Vlad's direct words. His opinion of Maddie is that, quote, "The lab accident robbed me of my chance at you." This right here is indicative of his true nature. Honestly, this comment really gives toxic incel vibes, for lack of a better word. Vlad acts like being with Maddie was his right, and that it was a right taken away from him by Jack. In Vlad's mind, if that accident wouldn't have happened, he was guaranteed to have ended up with Maddie. This is just a disgusting entitled mindset, and it makes me lose any and all empathy for Vlad. In the end, when he phases through the RV and takes Maddie, she tells him to let her go, and his response is,
"Never again, woman."
This right here makes it clear that in Vlad's mind, Maddie is his property. The man's literally trying to take her, and when he said never again, that implies that he thought she belonged to him in the first place. In all reality though, it's worth pointing out that not only in the flashback, but also in the picture that Vlad has of the three of them, Maddie seems to gravitate a lot more towards Jack. She stays near him in the lab. They were standing super close to each other in the picture, while Vlad was a few feet away. It felt like the show's writers were exaggerating the fact that Maddie had a lot more interest in Jack than Vlad. One thing I did find very odd though, is that point where the Fentons first arrive at Vlad's mansion. Vlad gets uncomfortably close to Maddie, leaning in, saying that the Packers are one of two things that his money hasn't been able to buy him yet. To me, this felt like Vlad was trying to imply that he's attempted to win Maddie over with his money already previously. Of course, we know this certainly isn't the case, but even as a kid, it honestly made me wonder if maybe Vlad had tried to make a move on Maddie before that Jack isn't aware of. Again, he makes the point about his money, which we know that he didn't get until after the accident. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not wondering if Maddie went behind Jack's back or anything. We all know that Maddie is a faithful queen. However, what I'm wondering about is maybe if over the years Vlad had made attempts at contacting her and just didn't tell Jack. We know that Vlad hasn't spoken a word to Jack since that fateful day. However, we don't know if he's tried to make contact with Maddie or not. Knowing how he is, I wouldn't put it past him to have tried to convince Maddie to leave Jack using his wealth as sway, but she refused. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, if that had happened, Maddie certainly would have said something to Jack. The thing is though, what if she didn't? We all know that in Jack's mind, he has this beautiful picture of his college days. Him and Vlad were best friends, and the two of them were known for being party animals. After the accident, I'm sure both Maddie and Jack were convinced that Vlad would never speak to Jack again, especially as the years continued to pass. With that in mind, I can see why, if that had happened, Maddie maybe felt like telling Jack would cause more damage than not. It potentially could have been the kind of scenario where she didn't want to tell Jack because she didn't want to sour all the great memories that he has or crush the amazing image of Vlad that Jack has painted in his mind. By all means though, I cannot stress enough that that is all speculation just gathered from that weird interaction between Vlad and Maddie in the beginning. But like I said, even as a kid, I was curious if there was more to the story than we actually knew. As far as Vlad goes, I will say though, his charismatic nature and charm adds so many layers to the juiciness of his overarching plot throughout the entire series. When the time is right, he actually does a pretty decent job of hiding how much of a manipulative scumbag he is. There's just something about how he presents himself and how eloquently he speaks when he's focused on portraying himself in that manner that really emphasizes this man's ability to cover his tracks in the right scenario. Piggybacking off of his presentation of himself for a bit though, there is one huge thing that I'm really curious about as it pertains to Vlad. How is it that he has so much power with the ghosts? The vultures work for him, essentially serving as his lackeys throughout the series. Skulker ends up working for him, and in all reality, that's just this one episode. His list of accomplices and minions would increase as the series would progress. What could he possibly be offering these ghosts to get them to blindly do his bidding? By all means, him having power in his human form makes perfect sense due to him being able to use his riches to get whatever he wants and to persuade people. Humans are driven by money, which he has plenty of, and emotion, which he is very good at manipulating, being a slick-tongued charmer. The ghosts, on the other hand, have absolutely no use for money. They couldn't care less about human riches, so what exactly is it that drives these ghosts to do Vlad's work? The only conclusion that makes sense is the power. He's so strong that they fear him and are willing to do his bidding as an act of self-preservation. The other theory, as it relates to his power, is maybe how special he is due to him being half human and half ghost. Merely 2 episodes before this, Sidney Poindexter, who, keep in mind, has been trapped in the same pocket of the ghost zone since his unfortunate passing, was completely dumbfounded to meet Danny, who he deemed the halfa due to him being half human and half ghost. With that being said, though, Vlad is the original human-ghost hybrid. It's totally possible that he's gained a reputation in the ghost zone for having these powers, and as a result, maybe these ghosts are quick to side with him in hopes of benefiting from his powers in any way possible. If there's anything else I really want to touch on as it pertains to Vlad, it would be that weird scene with him in Danny's room in the middle of the night. I mean, putting the pieces together for Danny, it's easy to assume that Vlad found him in the middle of the hall and brought him to bed. But, like, Danny doesn't even question what Vlad was doing up in the middle of the night in the first place. Nor does he question the fact that this man is fully dressed up in a tuxedo complete with a bow tie in the middle of the night. I mean, first of all, if that rather unconventional sleep attire wasn't a dead giveaway that he might be up to no good in the middle of the night, his ominous tone certainly should have been. Oddly enough, all of this seemed to go over Danny's head. If anything, this is kind of a testament to how Vlad, under the specific circumstances of interacting with his potential enemies, sometimes slips up when it comes to covering his tracks. However, it's also a testament to how naive Danny can be. This is certainly something that would persist throughout this episode, and is something that we're going to circle back on in just a little bit. In the meantime, though, we have to talk about Jazz. The relationship between Danny and his sister is complicated to say the least. At this point in the series, she just drove me nuts. But as the series progressed, some truths are exposed and some perspective is gained, the relationship between her and Danny would change in an incredible way, and that's something that I'm hopeful to cover in a future video. In this episode, and a good portion of the series, however, she was just kind of infuriating. She tries to play kind of an overbearing pseudo-parental role towards her little brother, which just comes across really badly considering that she herself isn't an adult yet either. First of all, her advice in the beginning was absolute trash. Danny is confiding in his parents, saying that he's struggling with being a kid in this day and age, and it's worth noting that this statement is definitely one that's kind of loaded. On face value, of course, it's completely valid, but given what we know about Danny, he's juggling a whole other world of responsibilities on top of what's expected of him on a normal, everyday human basis. The thing is, though, that put aside, Jazz's advice is still straight up malarkey. She suggests that Danny feels this way because he doesn't know what it was like for them growing up as kids and young adults. If we really look at the big picture though, that is the farthest thing from the truth and definitely was not the right answer here. As a matter of fact, it is the complete opposite. Danny feels this way because his parents don't know what it's like for him to be a kid. The answer here isn't taking him on a nostalgic walk down memory lane. The answer is taking time to level with your son, hear him out, and have a little empathy for the kid. Like, it's hard to even justify where Jazz was coming from in the first place. Let's put it into perspective here a little bit. That's like you coming up to your parents and saying, "Mom, Dad, I'm struggling really hard with this calculus class." And them being like,
"Oh, you have it easy. Back in my day, we didn't have calculators and we had to do all of our math with sticks and stones."
When in reality, it's like back in their day, calculus was considered a college level course. Nowadays though, kids are made to take that class in high school. That's me speaking from experience. I remember being put in pre-calculus in my junior year and full-blown calculus in senior year. Now, as someone who's pretty good with complex math, it wasn't a huge issue for me, but if it was, I'd feel completely dismissed if I went to my parents for empathy and in response, they basically told me that I'm under the same amount of stress that they were at my age. This ties directly in with Danny's mom having that toxic mindset that leads her to telling him that there's nothing he's going through that they didn't go through when they were his age. Like, okay, boomer, just act like the world doesn't change and that nowadays it's exactly as it was 20 years ago. That's definitely healthy. I mean, for me personally, within just like 2 years of graduating high school, the landscape of school changed drastically. I graduated in 2012, and like 2 years later, my nieces who were in elementary school were being issued tablets to do schoolwork on. When I was growing up, spiral notebooks and mechanical pencils were all the rage. It didn't take long for that to change, and as a result, even I don't know what it's like to be a kid in this day and age, because the things that these kids go through nowadays is worlds apart from what my elementary school experience was like. More than anything, it just frustrates me when the older generations act like they know exactly what it's like being young in this day and age. Like, even outside of school and on a societal level, I am a 29-year-old man, and I have no idea what it's like to be an 18-year-old fresh out of high school and entering the workforce in this day and age, because in 2012, when that happened to me, the world was completely different back then. Jobs were different, cost of living was different. To act like the world doesn't change is just blatantly ignorant, and it kills me when people can't have a little bit of empathy for those who are going through it in this constantly changing world that we live in. Furthermore though, I definitely have to touch on that end scene with Jazz, because this just spoke volumes about her character, specifically at this point in the series. She was at Vlad's house for all of this. We see her leave his home theater in the midst of all the madness erupting, which would mean that she likely saw at least a small portion of this madness firsthand. On top of that, a ton of other people also saw Jack flying as he was possessed. However, when the family is leaving, Jazz makes a comment about Harriet being fired, saying that it was justified because she tried to submit a crackpot story about ghosts, remarking that it belongs in the Inquirer. This, to me, really highlighted the juxtaposition of Jazz's character. She makes this comment, then literally rolls over and checks out, implying her disinterest in discussing that topic any further. I mean, think about it though, she's a very fact-driven, intelligent person that has a big interest in psychology, but she seems completely dismissive of something that she may have witnessed firsthand, or if she didn't, multiple other people did, including her own immediate family. Despite that though, she's quick to just dismiss it, rolling over, thinking that she knows everything about how the world works. This really just felt like appropriate crackpot psychologist who thinks they know everything behavior. Though she may not actually be an aspiring psychologist, she prides herself in being very well versed in psychology. Now, one big thing I really want to stress though is that this take on Jazz is only representative of this specific episode and her attitude near this kind of general point in the series. I cannot stress enough the character progression in Jazz throughout the series is literally beautiful and nearly flawless. As a person, she grows in an incredible way, and seeing her and Danny grow closer as brother and sister as a result of this is really a heartwarming thing. All things considered, I really love how the show did such a great job of building upon their foundation. To me, there's just so much joy in a cartoon that can have a sense of continuity and consistency throughout its entire duration. There is one big thing that this reminded me of though. The whole arc and story with Vlad really kind of brings me back to Slade from the original Teen Titans. I mean, Vlad's strength and his cunning, combined with the fact that he was the one who was sending a good portion of the ghosts from past episodes to attack Danny's family. In all reality, it's worlds apart, context and content-wise, but it made me think of some big revelations regarding Slade, and it's one of those things that makes you question literally every single episode before this, to the point where you're almost tempted to go back and watch them all to look out for clues that may have been there all along to point to the fact that someone bigger than all of this was pulling the strings. It's worth pointing out though, for the sake of my fellow Teen Titans fans out there, that the revelations brought on as it pertains to Slade were a massive boom that makes Vlad's feel like a dramatic sizzle in comparison. Between the two shows though, it's amazing how they did such a great job of foreshadowing as well as connecting the dots to past episodes. Focusing on Danny Phantom and circling back to Danny being naive, I have to point out that he has a really great habit of missing blatant red flags and indicators that something is off. With that being said though, he's a 14-year-old kid and a naive nature tends to come with that territory. In all reality, the signs were blatantly there. For example, when Vlad asked Danny, "Can you do this yet?" as he duplicates himself, this was the moment that Danny should have known that this mysteriously strong ghost that he was fighting was also half human. Danny has learned firsthand that his powers are vastly different than that of a normal ghost, and with that being said, the "yet" in that sentence was definitely an indicator that this strange ghost was a lot more similar to Danny than he could have ever expected him to be. Overall though, the foreshadowing in this episode was amazing, in both things that are overarching and things that were contained to just this specific episode. Like when Danny and Vlad were fighting and Danny asks him how he can do what he was doing in the fight, Vlad tells him that it was years of practice which Danny doesn't have time for. That right there was our foreshadowing that Vlad was up to a lot more than just making life plans and financial decisions while he was in the hospital and out of commission. That fact was revealed later in the episode when he declares it directly to Danny, but with the context clues, this right here is about the point where you could have connected those dots on your own. On top of that, you may not have noticed it, but they completely foreshadowed Vlad being a ghost before we even knew it was the case. In the beginning of the episode, we get a flashback to the 80s and the lab accident that Jack caused. When the portal blasts Vlad in the face, it ends up turning his hair snowy white and it made his eyes glow. The same exact symptoms that are described to have happened to Danny when he was turned into a ghost. Of course, there isn't a specific episode where this happens, however, the story is told in the intro to the show that we see in literally every episode.
When he first woke up, he realized he had snow white hair and glowing green eyes.
The foreshadowing here was just amazing to me. That one is such a small and simple thing, however, if you're perceptive enough, you would have already connected those dots from the start. However, even if you didn't, going back and realizing that the signs were there from the start of our introduction to Vlad is a really cool thing to let soak in. On top of the foreshadowing though, the sense of continuity that was able to shine through in this episode made me so happy. Specifically speaking, the show's writers keeping up with the current state of Skulker. Most shows have kind of a formula where they freely bring back villains as they please without any explanation of how they overcame their last defeat by the protagonist. In this show though, they refuse to leave that stone unturned, and this episode is a fantastic example of that. Skulker shows up and Danny is completely confused about how he got his suit back and how he got free. They drove the point home even further by keeping up with Skulker having Tucker's PDA and him still sticking to Danny's schedule, which was established in the first episode to feature Skulker. This right here really enforces that sense of continuity in us as viewers, and that's something that, in my opinion, hits really hard in a children's cartoon. Of course, we expect that of adult shows for the most part, but when it comes from a children's cartoon, it feels almost out of left field, especially considering that not very many, if any, Nicktoons were displaying any continuity whatsoever. All things considered though, the mix of foreshadowing and revelations in not only this episode but throughout the entire series is something truly epic. On the whole, after consuming this episode on its own, one can't help but wonder, what if all of this is foreshadowing something even bigger in the grand scheme of the show? But that's certainly a story for another video. And of course, what do you guys think? Did the continuity and foreshadowing throughout Danny Phantom affect how you felt about the show? Let me know in the comments down below. I always love seeing your guys' feedback. I gotta give a massive shout out with all the love in the world to my patrons, especially though those of you in the true 90s kids tier. I cannot thank you all enough. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like and give praise to the algorithm in hopes that it pushes this video to everyone else, and as always, thank you all so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next one. Peace.